Welcome to The Other Side, Mississippi Today's political podcast. The Other Side lets you hear directly from the most connected players and observers across the spectrum of politics in Mississippi. From breaking news to political strategy to interviews with candidates and elected officials, we'll bring you facts, perspectives, and context that helps you cut through the noise and understand all sides of the story. I'm your host, Adam Ganucheau. Really excited about today's episode. We've got a couple really great guests who are both first-timers on The Other Side. I'll introduce first in the studio with me today, Brian Howey. Hey, Brian, how's it going?
Hey, Adam, glad to be here.
On the phone, joining us from New York is Nate Rosenfield. Nate, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Adam. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. If anyone listening to this episode doesn't know these two guys, I would venture to guess you probably know their reporting. They are on the team of journalists at Mississippi Today in partnership with the New York Times Local Investigations Fellowship that has been for the last year or so working on a series called Unfettered Power Mississippi Sheriffs. This series has covered the sort of breadth of the power and the unchecked power, I should say, of Mississippi sheriffs across the state, revealing how sheriffs in Mississippi rule like kings, they've said, wielding a lot of power, exploiting and abusing a lot of people across the state that they're supposed to be protecting. Notably, the series has focused a good bit of attention, a lot of attention on the Rankin County Sheriff's Department, and in particular, the unit within the Rankin County Sheriff's Department that's become known pretty famously as the Goon Squad. So, the reason I wanted to have Nate and Brian on today's episode is because in that series this past week, they have published a shocking follow-up to the Rankin County Goon Squad series. And guys, I could use any number of adjectives to describe this latest piece. I'm really excited to dig into this a little bit more with you guys in this episode. I think everybody will enjoy it. Nate, I want to toss it to you. I don't even want to try to explain this. I want you to do it because you know it better than anyone, obviously. And I should say, just before we get started here, This reporting has already been recognized as some of the best in the world. Earlier this year, back in I guess early May, right? So still just last month, I suppose. It was honored as a finalist for the 2024 Pulitzer Prize for local reporting. So, all that said, Nate, I'm hopeful that you can just kind of walk us through this latest piece, and I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about the Pulitzers and the journalism of all this in just a few minutes.
Yeah, happy to. So what we found was we were able to access a WhatsApp channel that was maintained by this group of deputies for a number of years. And just to clarify that a little bit, WhatsApp is like a messaging software, but it's encrypted, so it makes it a little tougher to access. And the group of deputies here was a patrol shift that went by the moniker the Goon Squad. A couple of its members were recently sentenced for the torture of three men. And this was sort of the wider patrol shift that those guys were a part of, as well as other members of the Rankin County Sheriff's Department. And it basically shows their daily conversations over the span of years. And some of it is disturbing, shocking. They frequently joke in it about conduct like tasing people excessively. They joke about, sexual violence toward women. And in a lot of their banter, there are descriptions there's description of conduct that matches allegations that we encountered in our previous reporting. So, for example, they joke about roughing up suspects who they dislike, about tasing them in the face or the genitals. And these were all things that we saw in our previous reporting about a number of these deputies.
Brian, I'll ask you this question first, and Nate, you may want to chime in too. As a reporter, when you see messages like this for the first time regarding subjects and people you've been covering and, have been out in the public sphere for their bad behavior to this point, when you see messages like this as the reporter, what was your first sort of response, reaction?
My first response or reaction was wow. It seemed to click in a lot of ways together, these pieces that had been missing for us. We had heard from one side of this story from alleged victims who over the past 18 years say that they have been tortured by Rankin County Sheriff's deputies. We're talking about people who say they've been waterboarded, choked out with lamp cables, who have had blowtorches held to their feet, who have been threatened by these deputies that if they ever speak out, they'll be killed or imprisoned forever. But to see it from the deputies' perspective, to see them making light of doing similar things to people. And to be clear, these were jokes in this channel. We have no evidence in this channel that any of these jokes were actually carried out, and we haven't matched any incidents in this channel to any real world incidents so far. Okay, so we need to make that clear. But the fact that they were joking about this, the fact that some of the deputies who were joking about this are now in prison for having carried out very similar things last January in the case of Michael Jenkins and Eddie Parker, it was just shocking to see this from the deputies' perspective, to see the normalization of this sort of violent behavior happening right in front of our eyes.
Yeah. A question for you guys. I mean, in the reporting, it makes this clear, but you're able to see the names and sort of who texted what in this group text. But were there some names of people who still work at the sheriff's department who haven't been charged with crimes, who aren't sentenced to prison yet? Is that part of the findings of this latest piece?
Yes, absolutely. So there are a number of deputies who still work at the department. I believe at least 9 still work there who were a part of this chat. And some of them even have been promoted in this time span. So one of the deputies who featured in the piece, named Jeremiah Jordan, is now a lieutenant at the department.
Wow. I'm tempted to read off some of these exchanges, but I don't really want to. I think if you're listening to this and you haven't read it, go read it. You can find it on the Mississippi Today website or the New York Times website. It'll be near the top of both sites still, I'm sure. If you Google just Rankin County Goon Squad, it'll come right up. I guess a question that I have, and I saw this sort of watching it play out sort of shortly after we published, and then it looked like later in the day the department actually did respond. What was the response both from the department to this reporting, and also it looks like you guys obviously reached out to some of the individuals who had been in this text thread too. Just what was the response from both individuals and the department at large?
Sure. So I can start with the individual deputies who we contacted and who did speak to us. By and large, the response was, as first responders, as police officers who are the first people at the scene of an emergency or a crime, you're often coming into direct contact with violence. You're coming into direct contact with dead bodies. The results of crimes and accidents that can be quite gruesome. And their argument was that it is normal for people in these sorts of positions to exchange a sort of gallows humor in order to compartmentalize and deal with the trauma of encountering that on a daily basis.
There was one, I pulled this. I said that I wasn't going to do this, but I'll do it because I pulled it and I've got it right here in front of me. There was this exchange about sort of, I guess some deputies had come across a body that they found decomposing in this Robin Hood neighborhood or community, which is southeast Rankin County. It's as you guys wrote, an impoverished neighborhood of rundown trailers, makeshift shacks that deputies often targeted for drug raids.
Yeah,
so
it's part of Brandon.
That's right. This is a neighborhood that Rankin County Sheriff's Department knows very well, for better or for worse. And so somebody posted a picture of the body they found. One deputy replied, Hunter Cook replied, "That's hot." Lieutenant Middleton, who was obviously one of the leaders of this unit, right? He replied, "Poke him with a stick." And then Deputy Cook, another same guy, Hunter Cook, replied, $5 if you take a selfie with your arm around him.
And this was a repeat occurrence in this chat. This wasn't just a single, one day they found a body and, they had one round of jokes with them. Over and over again, we saw that when these deputies came across bodies, they would post pictures. They would demand pictures from the deputies on the scene, first of all. And then when those deputies posted the pictures, they would take turns mocking the person who was dead, comparing their state of decomposition to other bodies they had discovered, at times mocking the families of the person who had died. We didn't want to reach out to other first responders for the story or anything like that. We wanted to just present this to the public at face value. But what I have seen is that people claiming to be first responders in comments on these stories have said, "Oh, well, I have encountered dead bodies. And yes, we do have a gallows humor, but this is beyond the pale."
Of course. And again, to your point earlier, we know that members of this squad of officers have already been convicted of federal crimes related to this behavior. So it almost magnifies the sort of I think what you guys have done in this latest piece is you're really pulling back that curtain, right? You're like sort of you're just bolstering the argument that prosecutors made in federal court. You're bolstering the previous reporting that you guys have done exclusively about just how bad this was, the extent of how bad this behavior was. And that's really interesting. And the department, generally speaking, how did they respond?
So the department provided us with a written response, in which they reaffirmed that they had no knowledge of the Goon Squad moniker. They did not know that this group called itself that. They said that they were not aware of the existence of this chat or its contents until we informed them of this in our reporting. And they also mentioned that they have done investigations into deputies where allegations of misconduct have come up in this recent period, reviewing body cam footage and incident reports, and that they haven't found allegations of wrongdoing worthy of any kind of censure or somebody being fired besides what they've done already. So they were referring in that to members of the group who still work in the department and who were a part of this chat. They were basically saying, we haven't found any substantial evidence that they've done something worthy of them being fired. And Brian, I don't know if you want to talk any more about you had some more conversations with them, but.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to underline here what Nate is saying. The department, in response to us bringing segments of this channel to them and saying, at least 3 deputies who are going to be named in this story have engaged in jokes about kidnapping and killing a criminal suspect that they knew about, have exchanged and joked about a video of what appears to be a deputy defecating on someone's bed after they arrested the person and then ruminating on whether or not that person slept in the bed afterwards, and a deputy who currently works at the department posting pictures of a rotting corpse so that his fellow deputies could joke about the corpse in the chat. After reviewing all of that, had determined that their deputies hadn't done anything that wasn't proper or professional. I I mean, I think that speaks volumes. We also, they asked us for a copy of the chat, and for various reasons involving source protection, we cannot share or publish a copy of this chat.
Of course.
But we did follow up to ask them if they had asked their own deputies who had access to this chat for copies of it. They told us that they did not have the power to demand copies of this chat from their current deputies. We followed up with them to ask if they had asked the deputies to provide copies of this chat, even if they could not force them to give them. And we also asked if they had gone to the Department of Justice to ask them for copies of this chat, because we know that the Department of Justice has access, at least on some level, to some of these WhatsApp channels. We've heard mentions of these WhatsApp channels in the criminal information that the Department of Justice put out last year, in the sentencing hearings in March for the 6 officers who went to prison for the January torture incident. We know that the Department of Justice is aware of these WhatsApp channels and likely has copies of them. So we asked the Rankin County Sheriff's Department if they had reached out to them to get copies of these so that they could do a more thorough investigation. They declined to answer our questions.
That's telling, isn't it? You know, this is a political podcast, as the title suggests. We talk politics here, and this first and foremost, I'd say that the continuation of this series that you guys have done from the start of it last year all the way to this week, it gets a lot of buzz in Mississippi's sort of political circles because of sort of the prominence of one man in particular, Rankin County Sheriff Brian Bailey. He has been the sheriff for how many years? He's a long time.
Since 2011.
2011. He really is considered sort of one of the sort of central players in sort of the Jackson metro area political scene. And a lot of people, readers who have read your stories, politicos in the halls of even the state capitol, just sort of, talking about this story and your reporting as it continues, have asked the question, how is it possible that Brian Bailey is still the sheriff of Rankin County after several of his sort of deputies and leaders in the department under him, directly under him, reporting to him, have now been sentenced with federal crimes? The more reporting that comes out, the more, as we just discussed, it just is obvious that this department has been mismanaged and has been so out of control in these ways for so long. From y'all's perspective, Nate, maybe I'll throw this question to you first, but Brian, I want you to answer too, because I think everybody listening would have this question. From your perspective, the folks who know this story better than anyone, who know these things better than anyone, how is Brian Bailey still in that spot in office?
It's a great question. I mean, I don't have an answer, in the sense that it's up to him to resign. He's been elected to the position.
It's an elected seat, yeah.
Yeah, at the end of his term, he could choose to resign. He's chosen not to. He will face re-election at the end of his term, so we'll see what happens at that point. But I think part of what that question brings up for me is, one of the questions that has lingered since the sentencing hearings is how this was allowed to go on. And part of the answer that we heard during the sentencing was a number of deputies spoke about sort of a culture in which bad behavior was rewarded within the department. So, that doesn't directly tie to the sheriff. They didn't mention the sheriff specifically in their testimony in court, but I think it's kind of prompted for people this lingering question of, what is that culture? What was it like for these deputies in their department? And I think that this WhatsApp channel really provides the clearest answer to that we've been able to see so far. You see the day-to-day conversations of these guys, how they interact with each other, how they encouraged each other, how they supported each other. And what you see is an environment in which misconduct was approved of, encouraged, or tolerated by this group, including their superiors. Jeffrey Middleton, who was one of the 6 who was convicted, he was the supervisor of this group of patrol deputies. He was the boss, and he was directly involved in a lot of the most egregious conduct that we saw in the chat. Not just seeing it, but also actively participating in it. So I think, I really encourage people to read this piece, especially if they've been having that same question about what the culture in this department was like, because I think it really helps shine a clearer light on that for readers.
Yeah, I want to just stab at the core of your question here, which is why Brian Bailey is still the sheriff of Rankin County, and you guys touched on this earlier. Brian Bailey was elected to the job. As an elected position, he cannot be removed by a governing body. He needs to be removed by the voters of Rankin County, right? So, the Board of Supervisors at Rankin County cannot decide to remove Brian Bailey from his position. The governor cannot decide to remove Brian Bailey from his position that we're aware of. They can call for his resignation. I will note that neither the Board of Supervisors in Rankin County nor the governor of Mississippi has called for Brian Bailey's resignation. But
or any notable public official, right?
No notable public officials that we are aware of have called for Brian Bailey's resignation, which is interesting because we have spoken to other law enforcement veterans, people who have led departments in the past, who have told us that they're quite frankly shocked that Brian Bailey is still in power, who have told us that, if they were in issues as a police chief, they would have been out the door immediately because, in their mind, there are two possible avenues here for Brian Bailey. Either he was aware of what was happening and allowed that to happen at his department. And from what we've heard, there was a culture of violence at the department that makes it, very questionable as to whether or not Brian Bailey was aware of that. Or he had no idea that this was going on at this department, which in the policing experts we've spoke to's minds points to Brian Bailey not having control over his department. But the bottom line is that unless Brian Bailey is convicted of a crime and put in prison, he cannot be removed from office until the next election.
Which is 2027, by the way. So what's interesting about this is he was reelected this past November, right?
He was reelected this past November. He ran unopposed. Notably, the news of Michael Jenkins and Eddie Parker being tortured by Rankin County deputies didn't come out until shortly after the deadline to register as an opponent for the sheriff's race this past year.
Interesting.
And I just want to note here that Brian Bailey has not been formally accused of any crimes. Brian Bailey has not been charged with any crimes, and he has not been convicted of any crimes related to anything at the Rankin County Sheriff's Department.
Although it's important to mention, our team at Mississippi Today also produced a story. It was led by Jerry Mitchell and Alyssa Daly that covered the sheriff allegedly requesting a subpoena to monitor the phones of his girlfriend and her boyfriend at the time, which was conduct that was investigated by the Attorney General's office.
Her husband at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really just, the course of this reporting, I was just reading that is right before you even said it, that story. The headline on that story is "The Sheriff, His Girlfriend, and His Illegal Subpoenas." Just mind-boggling stuff out of Rankin County. And yeah, so the next election would be 2027.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Have you guys spoken much with him directly? Asked him the questions. Have you had the access to? I guess that's probably part of it. But what has he said for himself and in his own defense on all this?
Well,
Brian was able to get him on the phone once,
yeah.
but we've mostly talked through the department lawyer. Yeah, I guess you can speak to that, Brian.
Yeah, for the most part, he has declined to speak with us. We reach out to him every time we're about to publish a story in order to give him an opportunity to comment. So far, the only time he's ever done that was just before our investigation came out last November, when I spoke to him briefly over the phone. And I don't have the direct quote in my head, but I asked him how it was possible that he did not know that deputies at his department had been allegedly torturing people for the past 20 years. And he responded to the effect of, I have 230 people at my department. I can't keep track of all of them. Other than that, and since then, he has not answered our phone calls. He has not responded to our emails. And all of our communications with the department have been either through the department's attorney, Jason Dare, or deputies themselves.
Before we go, I want to talk about just like the sort of journalism of all of this. It's an incredible thing for a journalist, any journalist, to be recognized by the Pulitzer Prize Board for their work. This series very rightfully earned a finalist nod for the 2024 Pulitzer Prize for Local Reporting. That's a huge deal. Congratulations again to both of you on that. To Jerry Mitchell, our colleague, to Alyssa Daly, who was on this story from the beginning. Brian, you were in our newsroom the day the Pulitzers were announced. Nate, I think you were in New York, right, at the Times newsroom. But Brian, you and Jerry were here in Mississippi with us, and we were kind of watching these things roll in live, and it was a great day, a great celebration. And one of the things that Jerry Mitchell, who wanted to be here today but couldn't, to be just talking about this latest story, but one of the things Jerry said to the staff, sort of in response to the Pulitzer Prize finalist nod, was, "We ain't even close to done." And obviously, the story this week proves that as well. But what's next? Are y'all still sort of probing on the Rankin County angle specifically? Are you going to broaden that out? Is there more to come? Can readers expect more here?
They can absolutely expect more.
Good.
Nate?
Yeah, I think we're being a little tight-lipped.
That's right. That's right.
We don't want to say too much, but we are still very much looking into the department. We have more stories lined up that we're really excited to share, and they'll hopefully be coming out soon. Within a matter of months, we should have more stories rolling.
Great.
And I'll say that we are always open to tips. Whether you want to, I'll just say that we are always open to accepting more information, whether that comes anonymously or not. We try to chase down every tip that comes through to us. So if you want to reach out and share information with us, our contact information can be found on the Mississippi Today website and at the New York Times website. Just search for our names on there and you should be able to find our profiles and contact information. Please reach out. If you want to arrange for more secure communication channels, we are equipped to do that. We're equipped to protect our sources. So please reach out, share information with us.
Yeah. In closing, I'm going to ask both of y'all to answer this question. Anybody listening to this would know immediately that you guys take what you do very seriously as investigative journalists. What does investigative journalism mean to you, and why is it important in a place like Mississippi right now?
Howey ends with the hard one.
I think investigative reporting is really all about confronting the truth. As individuals, that's what Brian and I are trying to do every day, trying to deal with these very difficult stories and uncover them, and also societally, these stories allow the public to get a plain view of what's been going on in their community, and wrestle with it. We can't predict the outcomes. We're not at the levers of power, but we can help society to address what wrongdoing has occurred. And I think that is really the beginning of change. And in terms of its meaning in Mississippi, as you know well, Adam, the state is, it's an incredible place, and it has incredible journalists working here, but it lacks resources in this area. Something Brian and I talk about a lot is that as we were working on this Goon Squad story, there were other great reporters doing daily stories alongside of us, but we didn't feel the weight of having, real investigative resources pushed up against us, where there were big national competing newsrooms trying to get at this story. We felt kind of alone in that respect, which should not be how it is. For a story like this of such importance to the state, there should be tons of journalists who have the capacity to cover it. And unfortunately, that's not true in Mississippi right now. And what that means is it's all the more needed, because when there isn't a strong presence of journalists besides folks like the incredible newsroom here at Mississippi Today, as well as others, but when there isn't that strong presence, it can lead things to fall into the shadows, which is what happened in Rankin County for many, many years.
Brian?
I think Nate put it pretty well. The only thing I'll add is that, without investigative journalism, abuses of power are allowed to flourish. And so our job is to use the truth to expose those abuses of power, like we did with the Goon Squad, and like we will continue doing here in Mississippi for the rest of this year. We are doing this work for the people of Mississippi, because the people of Mississippi deserve good journalism. And so we're doing our best to uncover the truth, and we hope that truth will be used for the betterment of the people of Rankin County and the people of Mississippi. So stay tuned.
Well, I'll speak on behalf of all of Mississippi. Whether they agree with me or not, I'll do it. I think I've earned that. And say thank you both for what you've done and what you're doing. I think you're both exactly right about the importance and the power of investigative reporting. This is such vital information that the public needs to know. And, I remarked several times this past week after this latest piece came out, the one we've been talking about today, this wouldn't have come out. This would never have come to light, I don't believe, without committed investigative reporters such as yourself, working sources, getting to know people, getting to know the facts, getting to know, exactly what's at stake here, and deciding for everyone what they need to know and what they need to see. And it's just incredible. Thank you both so much for everything you do for Mississippi, for everything, that you have done over the course of this series. It's just incredible reporting, and I'm in awe of you guys, and am so grateful for you being here. So thank you so much.
It's a privilege to be here. Yeah, our pleasure.
As we cover the biggest political stories in the state, you don't want to miss an episode of The Other Side. We'll bring you more reporting from every corner of the state, sharing the voices of Mississippians and how they are impacted by the news. So what do we need from you, the listener? We need your feedback and support. If you listen to the podcast on a player like iTunes or Stitcher, please subscribe to the show and leave us a review. We also have an email in which you can share your feedback. That address is podcast@mississippi-today.org. Y'all can also reach out to me or any of my colleagues through social media or email. And as always, thank you for your feedback and support. Subscribe to our weekly podcast on your favorite podcast app, or stream episodes online at mississippitoday.org/theotherside. For the Mississippi Today team, I'm Adam Ganucheau. The Other Side is produced by Mississippi Today and engineered by Blue Sky Studios. We hope you'll join us for our next episode.